David A. Johnston sat with his legs stretched out in front of him, a notebook balanced on his lap, and a pen resting loosely between his fingers. The sun lit up his face as he turned toward the camera, offering a warm, easy smile to the man behind it, Harry Glicken, one of Johnston's own students. In that moment, captured on film, Johnston looked exactly how he felt: relaxed, confident, and even excited. After all, he was doing what he loved. As a volcanologist with the U.S. Geological Survey, he was stationed at an observation post near the restless Mount St. Helens, studying its alarming rumbles and documenting every new sign that the mountain was preparing to wake up. No one could have known that this image would become hauntingly significant. Only 13.5 hours after that smile, Johnston would be gone, killed in the catastrophic eruption of Mount St. Helens on May 18, 1980. The explosion obliterated everything around him. His last transmission, crackling over the radio to the closest USGS office in Vancouver, Washington, carried both shock and certainty. Those were his final words. His remains were sadly never recovered. What makes the story even more tragic is the twist of fate that placed Johnston on duty that morning. The shift was supposed to belong to Harry Glicken, his student, the same young man holding the camera during that peaceful moment in the sunshine. Glicken had asked Johnston to swap shifts so he could attend a job interview, and Johnston agreed. When news of the eruption broke and word spread of Johnston's death, Glicken was devastated. He immediately joined helicopter crews searching through the ash-covered landscape for survivors and for any sign of his mentor. He refused to stop searching until officials forced him to step away for his own safety. But the saddest and strangest part of the story is what happened years later. Harry Glicken, the man whose life had been spared by that last-minute shift change, eventually became a respected volcanologist in his own right. Yet fate tragically caught up with him. In 1991, while studying Mount Unzen in Japan, he was killed by another volcanic eruption, the very kind of natural disaster that had claimed his mentor. Their stories remain forever linked, a chilling reminder of the unpredictable power of the planet they both dedicated their lives to understanding. This photograph is unsettling even before you know the story behind it. Taken from ground level, it shows a massive 300-pound black bear standing in the shadow of the trees. Its dark shape is framed by fallen branches and forest debris. The animal is roughly 100 feet away, far enough to feel distant, yet close enough that you can clearly see its head turned toward the photographer. The bear appears to be following him, watching with a quiet, deliberate focus. The image was captured not with a professional camera, but with a cell phone in the hands of a 22-year-old Darsh Patel, a Rutgers University student who had set out that day for a casual hike with 4 friends in the dense, wooded trails of the Abshawa Preserve in West Milford, New Jersey. What began as a normal afternoon outdoors quickly spiraled into panic. At some point during the hike, the group noticed the bear lingering behind them, trailing their movements. And at first, they tried to keep a steady pace, hoping it would lose interest. Instead, the bear closed the distance, becoming bolder, more determined. When it eventually charged towards them, the students made a split decision to scatter in different directions, in hopes of confusing the animal and giving themselves a chance to escape. They ran through the thick brush, shouting to each other, trying to stay within earshot while dodging trees and branches. These minutes felt like hours. When they finally regrouped, breathing hard and covered in scratches, one member of the group was missing, Darsh. They called the police immediately, but deep down, all of them feared what had happened. Rescue teams arrived at the preserve, forming search lines through the sprawling forest. For 4 long hours, they pushed deeper into the woods, until their worst suspicions were confirmed. Darsh Patel's body was found not far from the trail, mauled by the same bear he had photographed only moments earlier. The phone he used to take the final picture was discovered nearby, its casing marked with deep punctures, grim evidence of the attack. That haunting photo became more than an image. It became the final record of a tragic encounter. It captures the last moment when Darsh was safe, unaware of the danger closing in. And now it stands as a sobering reminder of how quickly nature's quiet beauty can turn into something unforgivable and even fatal. When 18-year-old Daylenn Pua traveled to Waianae, Oahu to visit his grandmother, he was full of excitement and curiosity, especially about one place in particular, the legendary Haiku Stairs, better known as Hawaii's Stairway to Heaven. The hike, a steep and dramatic climb along the Kolau mountain range, had long been closed to the public. Anyone caught on the stairs risked heavy fines or even arrest. Daylenn's grandmother reminded him of that, warning him not to attempt the illegal trek. But like many adventurous young hikers, drawn to the forbidden and the breathtaking, Daylenn couldn't resist the allure. On February 27, 2015, he boarded a bus and made his way towards the trailhead. Throughout the day, he sent photos and text updates to his grandmother, pictures of lush ridges, narrow pathways, and sweeping views of the island below. Everything seemed normal, but then the messages stopped. No one heard from him again. When Daylenn failed to return, his family reported him missing, sparking a large-scale search involving police, fire rescue teams, volunteers, and even the US Navy. Helicopters combed the mountains while crews scoured every ridge and ravine. But the terrain was unforgivable. Steep cliffs, tangled vegetation, and sudden drop-offs that could easily hide someone from plain sight. Despite days of searching, not a single trace of Daylenn was ever found. Then, something even more unsettling surfaced. As investigators and family members reviewed the photos Daylenn had texted that day, they noticed something chilling in one of them. In the far background, partially obscured by foliage, was the figure of a man, standing on the same trail, positioned behind Daylenn, almost as if he was following him. The image was blurry and distant, but undeniably human. The family released the photo to the public, pleading for anyone who recognized the man to come forward. Sadly, no one ever did. Authorities could not confirm whether the figure was another hiker, a trespasser, or someone with darker intentions. Over a decade has passed, and the case remains one of Hawaii's most haunting modern mysteries. Neither Daylenn nor his remains have ever been found. Whether he slipped and fell in the rugged mountains, got lost in the dense vegetation, or encountered someone with ill intent is still unknown. And the identity of the mysterious man captured in that final photo continues to linger like a ghost. An unanswered question in a story with no real closure. This photograph is deceptively peaceful at first glance. It shows a diver smiling through their mask as they pose beneath the clear blue waters off the Queensland coast. But when you look closer, something is terribly wrong. Behind them, resting unnaturally still on the ocean floor, is the motionless body of a woman. That woman was Tina Watson, and the truth behind why she was there would unravel into one of the most disturbing scuba diving deaths in modern history. Tina Watson had traveled to Queensland, Australia with her husband, Gabe Watson, to celebrate their honeymoon. They were young and newly married, and eager to experience the iconic dive sites of the Great Barrier Reef. One of those sites was the SS Yongala, a famous shipwreck known for its powerful currents and challenging conditions. Both Tina and Gabe were relatively inexperienced divers, and the dive company strongly recommended that they join a guided group for safety. Unfortunately, the couple declined. What happened next has been debated for years. During the dive, Tina began struggling. Witnesses later said she appeared panicked, drifting away from her husband. Instead of helping her to safety, Tina sank, falling nearly 100 feet to the ocean floor. Gabe later claimed that he attempted to rescue her, but was unable to descend because of an ear problem he had supposedly developed mid-dive. Other divers on the scene said Gabe made no real effort at an attempt to rescue her. By the time Tina was brought to the surface and hauled onto the dive boat, she had no pulse. Crews performed CPR on her for 40 minutes, but she was unfortunately pronounced dead on the site. Her death could have been dismissed as a tragic diving accident, if not for the inconsistencies that appeared almost immediately. Gabe's story shifted multiple times. Witnesses contradicted key details, and then investigators uncovered something even more troubling. Before their wedding, Gabe had asked Tina to increase her life insurance policy and make him the sole beneficiary. That revelation, combined with his behavior during the dive, triggered suspicions of foul play. Gabe Watson was eventually charged with manslaughter in Queensland, though those charges were dismissed after he served a short sentence for negligent behavior. When he returned to the United States, he faced additional charges related to planning the murder, though those were later dropped as well. To this day, Tina's death remains clouded by unanswered questions. An underwater tragedy forever shadowed by doubt, conflicting stories, and the unsettling possibility that her honeymoon became the setting for a calculated killing. The photograph shows a woman named Myra Hindley, standing on the windswept expanse of Saddleworth Moor, her pale hair almost glowing against the gray English sky. In her arms is her dog, Poppet. At first glance, this image seems like something you would see in a family photo album. But this image is far from innocent. Hindley isn't posing for a casual photo shoot. She is looking down at a grave. The grave of a 12-year-old boy, John Kilbride. One of the young victims she and her lover, Ian Brady, lured, tortured, and buried out here on this lonely stretch of land. This photo was never meant to be sentimental. It was a trophy. Hindley and Brady had a disturbing habit. They documented themselves near the burial sites of the children they murdered, sometimes smiling, sometimes casual, sometimes like this, coldly indifferent. The photographs were never taken for memory's sake. They were symbols of power, proof of what they had done, landmarks that only they understood. When their crimes finally came to light in the mid-1960s, investigators found these images among their belongings. And as horrifying as that discovery was, the photographs became crucial. Detectives studied every detail: the slope of the land, the angle of the rocks, the positioning of the heather and grass. Those haunting images eventually helped police to locate several of the graves scattered across the moors. To understand the impact of this photo, you have to understand who Myra Hindley and Ian Brady were. They weren't just killers, they were child serial murderers whose crimes shattered the nation. Together they abducted, abused, and murdered children between the ages of 10 and 17. Their partnership was built on manipulation, obsession, and a shared fascination with cruelty. And Brady was the architect, consumed by violent fantasies and extremist ideology. Hindley became his enabler, his willing accomplice, helping him lure the victims, driving them to secluded places, and even participating in the horrors that followed. What chills people most about Hindley isn't just her involvement, it's her appearance in those photographs. The calmness, the stillness, the almost casual demeanor while standing over the secret graves of children whose families were desperately searching for them. She looks down at the earth with no visible grief, no remorse, just a quiet, eerie detachment. The moors themselves are bleak, but it's the knowledge of what lies beneath them and who stands above them that make this image unforgettable. It's a reminder that evil doesn't always look monstrous. Sometimes it stares down at the ground with a dog in its arms, posing for a picture that hides a buried nightmare. This photo is just a small, delicate girl with wide eyes and a shy expression. Nothing about her appearance suggests the unimaginable cruelty she endured. The world knows her only as Genie, a pseudonym created to protect her real identity. Her story is one of the most disturbing cases of childhood isolation and abuse ever documented. From the time she was barely able to walk, around 20 months old, Genie's father confined her to a single, dark room. Not for hours, not for days, but for years. He strapped her to a modified potty chair, her body immobilized, facing a blank wall. When she wasn't tied to the chair, she was bound inside a crude crib covered with wire mesh. She wasn't spoken to. She wasn't comforted. She wasn't even held. The only sounds she regularly heard were the muffled noises of the house, and at times her father's violent outbursts. She lived in near total silence. There was no play, no laughter, no human connection, just confinement and isolation, day after day, year after year. By the time she was discovered at age 13, she was so severely malnourished and developmentally delayed that the investigators described her as ghost-like. She barely made eye contact. She moved in slow, uncertain motions, like she was afraid of taking up space. Her vocalizations were primitive, soft, fractured sounds instead of words. Everything about her reflected the effects of years of sensory and emotional deprivation. And yet, when people saw her photograph, this tiny girl, with her hair pulled back and her expression soft, they struggled to reconcile her gentle appearance with the nightmares she lived through. The innocence on her face contrasted violently with the truth behind it. She had been raised without affection, without stimulation, and without freedom. Her world had been the size of a small room, her life reduced to the narrow strip of wall she stared at every day. Experts who later worked with her described her story as one of the most tragic examples of extreme abuse and neglect ever recorded. Genie is not just a victim. She was a symbol of what happens when a child is deprived of everything that makes us human: touch, language, love, and connection. Her rescue at 13 was only the beginning of another complicated chapter, but that single photograph, quiet, simple, and unassuming, it's a reminder that sometimes the cutest, most fragile-looking children carry the darkest, most devastating histories. There's a certain photo that still chills people years later. A simple Snapchat image taken on an otherwise ordinary winter afternoon. Abigail Williams is standing on the old Monon High Bridge in Delphi, Indiana. Her hands are tucked into her sleeves. The weather's cold enough to sting, but not enough to deter two best friends from exploring. It's a picture that should have been just another memory for two young teenagers. A casual upload to Liberty German's Snapchat at around 2:07 p.m. on February 13, 2017. But instead, it became the final image of Abigail alive. The bridge behind her, a rusted, abandoned railway line suspended high above the creek, looms like a landmark frozen in time. And that detail matters, because not far from this very spot, both Abigail's and Liberty's bodies were later found. What was once just a place for photos and adventure is now forever tied to one of the most haunting unsolved murder cases of modern America. What makes this case even more disturbing is the second image that is tied to it. Grainy, blurred, but infamous. A still pulled from a video Lily managed to record on her phone moments before the attack. The figure in the picture isn't fully visible. He's bulky, dressed in jeans, a blue jacket, hands in his pockets as he walks across the bridge behind them. It's hard to make out his face, but the shape, the posture, the ominous stride, it's unmistakable once you've seen it. He was less than 100 feet behind them at that point, close enough to hear them and close enough to watch. This image wasn't supposed to be iconic. Liberty recorded it instinctively with the awareness of a young girl who realized something wasn't right, even if she didn't fully grasp the danger closing in behind them. Investigators later said that her decision to start filming was incredibly brave. That quick instinct ended up giving the police the most crucial evidence in the entire case. The suspect's voice, his walk, and the only public photo ever taken of him. Over the years, the Delphi murders have been discussed endlessly on forums, YouTube channels, podcasts, and investigative threads. People dissect every frame, every pixel, every second of audio. But behind all the theories, what stays with you the most are the images. Abigail standing on that bridge for what should have been an innocent photo, and the shadow of a man closing in behind them. Step by silent step. Two best friends and one ordinary day, and a pair of pictures that captured the beginning of a nightmare. Most people know the face of Elizabeth Smart from the missing persons posters that once blanketed the United States, but far fewer have seen this photograph, a chilling, almost surreal image frozen in time during the 9 months she was held captive. Elizabeth is the girl on the far left, barely recognizable under layers of fabric, her face obscured by a veil meant to erase any trace of her identity. On the far right stands her captor, brazenly posing in public with the very child he had stolen. This picture wasn't taken in some hidden basement or secluded wilderness. It was captured at a social gathering, an actual party that her kidnapper decided to walk into, uninvited, with Elizabeth forced at his side. The sheer boldness of it is staggering. He paraded her around in the open, surrounded by strangers, gambling on the belief that the veil and her fear would be enough to keep her silent and unseen. And for a painfully long time, it did work. Elizabeth had been abducted from her home in Salt Lake City in June of 2002, dragged out of her bedroom at knife point, while their younger sister watched helplessly. Her kidnapper, a self-proclaimed prophet named Brian David Mitchell, believed he was acting under divine instruction. He kept Elizabeth under strict control, physically, psychologically, and spiritually, creating a twisted world where obedience meant survival. His partner, Wanda Barzee, enforced that control with a disturbing devotion. When you look at this photo, you're not just seeing a moment during Elizabeth's captivity. You're witnessing how manipulation, terror, and conditioning can keep a victim compliant, even in a room full of potential rescuers. Imagine the torment of standing among ordinary people, music playing, conversations happening, food being served, all while knowing you are right there in the open, yet unable to say a word. Elizabeth later explained that she didn't attempt to escape because she was horrified of what her captors would do to her family if she tried. This image is horrifying, not because of visible violence, but because of what it represents. The calculated ability of a predator to hide behind normalcy, to blend in, to smile for a camera while his victim stands inches away, forced into anonymity. It would take 9 long months before Elizabeth Smart was recognized on a street in Sandy, Utah, and finally rescued. But this photograph remains one of the most disturbing pieces of her story, a reminder of how evil can disguise itself in plain sight. This photograph was never meant to be seen. It wasn't discovered in a gallery or on a phone, or even deliberately saved. It was pulled from a damaged camera found inside a washing machine at the home of Travis Alexander. A camera that had been run through a full wash cycle, as if someone had desperately tried to erase the story it held. But technology has a way of preserving the truth, even when someone tries their hardest to bury it. When investigators recovered the images, what they found was a sequence of moments leading up to one of the most infamous crimes in modern true crime history. The photo you're seeing was taken just minutes before Travis Alexander was brutally attacked. He's standing in the shower, unaware, vulnerable, and completely trusting of the person behind the camera, his on-again, off-again girlfriend, Jodi Arias. Arias had always insisted she loved him, that she adored him, that she was incapable of hurting him. But the photos on that damaged camera told a different story, one that police, prosecutors, and eventually the world would come to know in horrifying detail. Travis Alexander suffered a level of violence that could only be described as frenzied and personal. He sustained 27 stab wounds. His throat was slashed from ear to ear, with such force that it severed his jugular vein, his carotid artery, and even cut into his trachea. As if that wasn't enough, he also had a gunshot wound to the head. Medical examiner Dr. Kevin Horn later testified that the shot may have been delivered after he was already dead, meaning the final act might have been less about killing and more about control, rage, or even trying to stage a narrative. There were defensive wounds on Travis's hands, indicating that he fought desperately for his life, but the attack was too much. The brutality was just simply overwhelming. And in the middle of all of this, before the bloodshed, before the frantic struggle, there was this picture, a quiet, almost mundane moment. Water cascading over his shoulders, a simple shower, a seemingly ordinary interaction between two people who had once claimed to love each other. That's what makes this image truly haunting. It's the calm before an explosion of violence, a snapshot of trust captured by the last person Travis ever expected to fear, a moment preserved against all odds by a camera someone tried to destroy, but couldn't. The truth survived that wash cycle, and so did the final moments of a man who never, ever saw the knife coming.